This is the Economic Dictionary, where we will discuss a number of the terms that you're responsible for in the unit of economics. We'll do some other activities later to apply these terms. As you can see from the picture, politics or government influences the economy, and the economy can influence the government and the decisions that they make, but they are separate. How do countries make a living? We're going to talk about Economics 101 and some of the terms and how they apply, and hopefully what motivates a country to make money is more than a swimming pool full of pudding. Economics, it's the study of how people, businesses, and societies choose to use scarce resources. Their resources aren't unlimited. The desires and wants of the people are unlimited, but their resources are scarce. They have a limited number of resources, so they have to make their money or run their country based on those limited resources, and that's the idea behind economics. Scarcity is the idea that those resources are limited within a country. A perfect example is Japan. They have very few resources. They have to import or bring in all of their, or at least most of their resources. They're very productive, however, and we're going to talk about how they are productive and kind of overcome the scarcity issue. A real world example, the 3 economic questions that each country asks themselves. And sometimes the government is involved in this, and sometimes the government is a little involved in it, and sometimes the government takes a step back and lets the free market be involved in how these questions are answered. But the 3 questions are: what will be produced, how will it be produced, and for whom will it be produced? Those are the 3 questions that each country will have to answer, as well as really on a more micro level, how does each business actually has to answer those 3 questions as well. An example is the Middle East. They have the natural resource of oil. It makes sense that they're going to base a lot of their business decisions on their natural resource of oil, and that's how they make most of their living and revenue. Supply and demand. Supply, it's the amount of goods produced. If Apple is going to make iPhones, if they don't produce enough supply, it affects your ability to get that product. Demand, that's the people or the citizens' want or desire of that particular item. If they don't want it, it sits on the shelf, and a perfect example is Christmas items after Christmas. Those items are marked down mainly because the demand is lower, so there isn't the demand for those items. Price is really determined where supply intersects demands, and the next picture shows it really well. Demand, it's where supply and demand meet. It's at this intersection right here. So right here where supply and demand meets, that's basically where you get your price. After Christmas, the demand drops and your price goes down. And you see a variety of different examples, but that's a good one for supply and demand. The 4 factors of production. The 4 factors of production are land, labor, capital, and entrepreneur. Those are your 4 ways or 4 things you have to have in order to make something. Land, that's real estate. It can be what's underneath the earth. It can be arable land. It's everything basically of Mother Nature. Labor, it's not just physical strength in your workers, it's also mental capacity of your workers, the training. So labor is more than just the people that you hire, it's also their abilities and capabilities. Your capital. Capital is right here. This is what we're talking about in terms of the items that you need to actually make a product, and we'll get into that in a little bit. And then finally, entrepreneur, that's your business people. That's the people that take the risk to run a business, and those are your 4 factors of production. We'll go through each one of these. Human capital, that's the knowledge and skills that your people have or your workers have. The more highly skilled and knowledgeable they are, the more specialized they are, the more they can produce, and the more it benefits a company or a country on that aspect. College education is an example of human capital, how you invest in your people. Again, we talked about Japan earlier. Their greatest resource is their people. Well, they are limited in terms of their scarce resources. They're on an island. They have to import all their, most of their natural resources and their energy supplies. Most of their country is mountainous. And so in order to be successful, they've had to really think outside the box, and how they've done that is educate their people, and they're very highly specialized and trained, and that's how they make their money in more service-oriented industries. The lower your literacy rate is, and we look down here to literacy rate, and it's the ability to read and write at the age of 15, it affects your economic growth. The more educated your people are, the higher standard of living and the quality of life improves. Capital goods, that's what you use to make your goods. For example, factories, machines, tools. These are all examples of something that you would need to make your product. Okay, it's something tangible, it's a physical item. Entrepreneur, that is somebody who brings all of these things together, your land, your labor, your capital goods, it's all of those things. They take an investment, they put their own money in, they take a risk to run a business. Steve Jobs is an example of an entrepreneur. Bill Gates is an example. Facebook, you got Google, real estate agents, Donald Trump. All of those people have taken great risks. They've been very successful. A lot of people take risks and they aren't as successful, but you got varying degrees of success based on the entrepreneur and their skills and what they have to work with. Economic system. This is the way a nation uses, it's the way in which a nation uses its resources to satisfy the needs and wants of people. So based on what they have, they've got to use what they have to be productive. And you've got 4 different types of economic systems. You've got traditional, you've got command, you've got mixed, and you've got market. The first one is traditional. That's an economic system in which basically tradition plays a role, your social roles. It's what you've had passed down from generation to generation. Your culture, it's all been passed down based on culture, how things are made and sold. Farming, for example, techniques were used by the grandfather to plow a certain way. Ancestors passed down different tips to be successful in farming, for example. But again, it's based on culture, social roles, and those skill sets have been passed down from generation. Subsistence farming, a cooking, a recipe. If you have a restaurant and you used all your old recipes from an elderly grandmother who's gotten all of her recipes from somebody else, that's an example of a traditional economy. A lot of these countries that have traditional economies will have areas that have a traditional economy. There aren't too many countries that their entire country is based on a traditional economy, but they do tend to be poorer countries that have aspects of traditional, and they may have aspects of a mixed or market as well. A command economy. And think of this, a great way to remember this is the word command. It's you're commanded by who? By the government. And they tell you what you will produce, how will you produce it, and how much, and how to distribute it. They basically control most of the aspects of your economy. And that's what a command economy is. An example is a communist country like Cuba or North Korea. They're telling their workers what to produce, what they're going to do. They get the same pay despite the quality of their work. They can do a great job or a poor job, but they're paid the same. They have a quota that they have to meet, but basically workers get the same pay. There's little incentive. There's not competition. You don't see as much quality from the workers because you've taken their incentive away. Those are examples of a command economy. A market economy is based on individual choice and voluntary trade. Your ability to trade with a country voluntarily. Free enterprise. Individuals, you can choose to buy or do business with somebody or another country, and you have that ability, or you can not do business with that country or that other business. That's a free market economy. A real world example is The United States has a large portion of a market economy. We choose to do business with those countries. We trade for what we need. They buy from us what they need, and the needs are satisfied. A mixed economy. This is an economic system that has features of, let's say, a traditional, command, and market. It's basically them all being mixed together, so it has a little bit of aspects. They may have traditional and a market economy only. It may have a little bit of government intervention and a market economy, which is us. We tend to be down toward the market side, but we are a mixed kind of market economy. Most countries are mixed. The United States, we have minimum wage. That's set by who? It's set by the government. So we do have government involvement. We have Social Security. That's an example of government involvement. After a certain age, we pay people money because they don't have the ability to work. We do have Amish. That's a traditional economy. All their way they make a living is based on cultural traits that have been passed down from generation to generation. We also have private industry that makes their own decision, which is an aspect of market. And that's exactly what a mixed economy looks like. It's a little bit of all or two of those economic systems. Voluntary trade or free trade. You trade freely. Trade is voluntary. It's an exchange of goods and services, or both. There isn't restriction on trade. We decide we need to trade with Japan, for example. We import their cars, or we import and we export energy source that they need. So there's lots of different back and forth trading. It's free trade. Trade barriers. This is interesting. Trade barriers is any law or practice that kind of prevents trade, just like you see in the word. A barrier is something that blocks something. It's a law or practice. We actually are blocking trade to some extent, and it limits free trade between countries. It can actually be a physical blockade, but a lot of times it's more like a law, and let's look at those. You've got tariffs. Tariffs, you see the T here? It's a tax, T and T. It's basically a tax on imported goods and services. A tariff raises the price. Are you more likely to buy an expensive item or an item made in the United States that's less expensive? There's an incentive to buy the more inexpensive item unless there's a quality issue. A quota, that's limiting the amount. That's a math term. You think of a quota, you're thinking you're limiting the amount that's coming into your country. So instead of 1 million units coming in, we might reduce it to 500,000. That creates scarcity, which raises the price. And again, the price raised incentivizes you as a consumer to buy the less expensive item. Trade barriers are basically designed to limit or increase the price of a product and limit trade so that there's a benefit for the country of those that are producing within the borders of a country. And so again, trade barriers basically are put in place to protect the country's own businesses. So those American businesses are protected from foreign companies that are trying to compete with them. And finally, let's look at embargo. Embargo is usually a government restriction, and it's usually put in place for political reasons. Oftentimes we may not agree with a country. For example, in a communist country, we may not agree with their human rights issue. So we will put an embargo in place, and we will basically stop importing or exporting goods or services of a particular item or completely with that country. So we might stop trading completely. For example, Cuba, we put an embargo on Cuba. We don't trade with them at all. If we put an embargo on a certain item, we might trade other things with that country, but we may put an embargo on that particular item. But usually it's designed to make a political statement, and that's what an embargo is. Economic growth, it increases the value of goods and services that a country makes from one year to the next. It's a comparison. How much did you make this year compared to last year? And that's basically what it is. Did you grow? Did your economy grow, or did it stay the same? It's basically all the goods and services produced in 2014 Did it grow? If it did, then you've got economic growth. If it didn't, you have a decreasing economy, and that's basically the idea of the term.